He grabbed her arm so hard she heard her own sleeve tear. That was the moment. Not the words he said after. Not the way his friends laughed. The sound of fabric ripping in a crowded hallway. And not one single person turning around. Conor Gallagher had never been told no by someone who looked like Nia Brooks. And the fact that she had dared, that this plus-size black woman who carried drink trays for a living had looked him in the eye and said, "No thank you," cracked something rotten open inside him. He dragged her toward the alley before she could scream. And when it was over, he straightened his jacket, checked his watch, and walked back inside to finish his drink. If that had been your daughter in that alley, if that had been you, would anyone have come back? Nia Brooks didn't think so either. She was wrong. Before we go any further, if stories like this one move you, if you believe that dignity is worth fighting for, no matter who you are or what you look like, please subscribe to this channel right now and hit that notification bell. Every single week, we bring you stories that the world almost forgot to tell. Drop a comment below and tell me what city or country you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to that alley. The night Dante Romano decided to burn down an empire started the same way most of his nights did, badly and late. He had spent 4 hours inside the private back rooms of Club Ossian, watching 2 city councilmen pretend they weren't terrified of him while asking for money. They had no intention of properly accounting for. He had smiled through all of it. That was the job. You smiled when you wanted to flip the table. You poured the drink when you wanted to walk out. You said, of course, when every cell in your body was screaming, absolutely not. By 11:15, he was done. Not tired in the way regular people get tired. Dante hadn't slept more than 5 hours at a stretch in probably 6 years. He was done in the way that men who carry too much for too long get done. A particular kind of emptiness that sits somewhere between your shoulders and never fully lifts. His driver, Marcus, was waiting at the front. But Dante had a habit, old, almost superstitious, of leaving through the back when a night felt wrong. He couldn't explain it to anyone who asked. It was just a thing he did. The back exit put him through the service corridor and out into the alley behind the building, where the kitchen staff smoked and the garbage compactors ran twice a night, and nobody looked twice at a man in a dark coat. I was pulling his collar up against the cold when he heard it. Not a voice. Not exactly. More like pressure. The sound of someone trying to take up as little space in the world as possible. Breathing controlled too carefully. The kind of quiet that only exists when someone is working very hard to maintain it. He stopped. The alley was poorly lit. One bulb above the kitchen exit, orange and half dead. Rain had been falling since 8 o'clock, and the ground was black and slick and reflecting nothing useful. He stood still for a moment, which was something he almost never did, and let his eyes adjust. She was beside the second dumpster, sitting with her knees drawn up, back against the brick wall, face turned down. A casino uniform, the kind the waitstaff wore at the Gallagher-adjacent properties 2 blocks over, black and gold, service-grade fabric that wasn't built for November. Her left hand was pressed flat against the ground like she was checking whether it was solid. Her right arm was wrapped around her own ribs. Dante looked at her for a moment. His first instinct, and he was honest with himself about this, at least privately, was to keep walking. He had people for situations. He had a woman named Petra who handled anything that fell under the category of delicate human problem. He had lawyers and fixers and an entire infrastructure designed so that he himself never had to personally touch anything that could go sideways. He kept standing there anyway. "Hey," he said, quietly. Not soft exactly. Dante Romano didn't really do soft, but low. Carefully calibrated to not sound like a threat. She flinched so hard her shoulder hit the wall behind her, and he saw it, even in that light, the way she moved wrong, the way her arm came up automatically, the way her whole body braced, the way her eyes, when they finally came up to meet his, were already doing the calculation, already asking how bad before she even knew who he was. He'd seen that look before. He'd seen it on people who owed the wrong kind of money, on people who'd made the wrong kind of mistake, on people who had already spent significant time learning that the world was not on their side. He hadn't expected to see it on a waitress in an alley behind his club on a Tuesday night. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, still that same careful quiet. "I'm just standing here." She didn't say anything. Her eyes tracked him the way a person tracks an animal whose intentions they haven't determined yet. There was a cut on her lower lip. He could see it even from 6 feet away. And the way she was holding her ribs, that wasn't cold. That was pain. "Can you stand up?" he asked. Her jaw tightened. "I'm fine." The voice was steadier than he expected. She was scared. He could see that clearly. But she wasn't going to show it more than she had to. That told him something. "You don't look fine," he said. "I said I'm fine." A beat. Then, quieter. "Please just go." He didn't go. He wasn't entirely sure why. Dante was not a man who made decisions based on impulse. Every choice he made had layers to it. What it cost, what it gained, who it affected, how it would read in 3 months when someone was sitting across from him trying to use it. Standing in a rain-soaked alley refusing to leave a stranger alone was not in any category of decision he normally operated in. And yet, he crouched down. Not close. He kept the distance, kept his hands visible, kept everything about his posture as unthreatening as a 6'1" man in a $3,000 coat can manage. "I own this building," he said, "which means technically you're on my property." He paused. "I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm saying it because I have somewhere dry and warm about 30 feet from where you're sitting, and a doctor I can call who doesn't ask questions, and I'd like to offer you both." She stared at him. "Who are you?" she asked. "Dante Romano." He watched her face. Most people in this city, at least the ones who moved in certain circles, reacted to that name. It wasn't always fear. Sometimes it was calculation. Sometimes it was a very specific kind of careful neutrality that told him they knew exactly who he was and had decided that pretending otherwise was the safer play. Nia Brooks looked at him like the name meant absolutely nothing. "Is that supposed to mean something?" she asked. And despite everything, despite the night he'd had, despite the rain, despite the cold, and the 2 councilmen and the 4 hours of smiling at people he didn't respect, something in Dante Romano's chest did a thing it hadn't done in a very long time. He almost smiled. "Not necessarily," he said. "Do you want to come inside or not?" She didn't say yes right away. That mattered to him later when he thought about it. She didn't scramble up and follow him just because he'd offered. She sat there for another full minute, in the rain, looking at him with those careful eyes, doing whatever internal math she needed to do, weighing the known danger of the alley against the unknown danger of the man, deciding somehow that the man was the lesser risk. She got up slowly. He didn't help her. She didn't reach for help, and he had enough sense not to offer what wasn't wanted. But he watched the way she moved, and what he saw made something in his jaw tighten. She was hurt worse than she'd let on. He held the service door open without saying anything about it. She walked through without saying thank you, which he also filed away. Not rudeness. Armor. The practiced self-sufficiency of someone who had learned a long time ago that gratitude made you vulnerable. He led her through the service corridor, past the kitchen, empty now, staff cleared out after midnight, and into the suite of private rooms at the back of the building. Not the rooms where he'd met with the councilman. A different set. Smaller. Less formal. A leather couch, a low table, a decent lamp, a mini-fridge. The kind of room where he sometimes spent the hour between meetings just sitting in silence. She stood in the middle of it and looked around like she was memorizing the exits. Smart, he thought. "Sit down," he said. Not an order. Almost. "Please," he added, which felt slightly foreign in his mouth. She sat on the edge of the couch, not settling in, perched. He went to the mini-fridge and found a bottle of water, set it on the table in front of her. Then he went to the door and stepped halfway into the hallway and made a call. 2 minutes. He came back. "Dr. Voss will be here in 20 minutes, he said. She looked up. "I told you, I don't need—" "You're holding your ribs like 2 of them might be cracked," he said. Not harsh, just factual. "And your lip is still bleeding a little, and you've been sitting in the rain for— how long?" She pressed her mouth together. "How long?" he asked again, gentler. "I don't know," she said. "A while." He pulled the chair from the corner and sat down across from her. Not too close. He'd been careful about distance since the alley. "What's your name?" She considered not answering. He could see it. "Nia," she finally said. "Nia." He didn't add anything to it. Just let it sit there, like it was enough. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" The silence that followed was the longest one yet. She was looking at her hands. They were shaking slightly. Cold, shock, probably both. And she seemed annoyed by that, like her own hands were betraying her. "It doesn't matter," she said. "It matters to me." She looked up at that, sharp, suspicious. "Why?" "Because you're sitting in my building," he said, "and someone put you in this condition, and I'd like to know who." Something moved across her face. Not the fear this time. Something older and heavier, like she was deciding whether the truth was worth the cost of saying it out loud. "A man," she said finally. "From the casino. He wanted something I didn't want to give him, and when I said no, he—" She stopped. Her jaw worked for a second. "His name is Connor Gallagher." The air in the room changed. Dante didn't move. He was good at not moving when a name hit him. Years of practice. But something shifted behind his eyes. Something careful and cold and calculating that had nothing to do with the warmth he'd been trying to project. Connor Gallagher. Patrick Gallagher's son. The Gallagher family. The treaty that had kept two organizations from open war for 11 years. The treaty that existed, fundamentally, because no one on either side wanted the kind of attention that came from bodies in the streets. Connor Gallagher, who was 28 years old and had never been told no by anyone who couldn't afford to say it. "He works at the casino?" Dante asked. His voice was even. "His family owns it," Nia said. "He was there tonight. I brought his table around and he grabbed my wrist and said—" She stopped again. "It doesn't matter what he said. I pulled away. He followed me into the back hallway. He grabbed my arm and—" She stopped a third time. This one was different. This one was because she wasn't going to say the rest of it. Not to a stranger. Maybe not to anyone. Dante didn't push. "Okay," he said quietly. "He said nobody was going to believe me anyway," she said. The words came out flat, like they'd been worn smooth by the time they reached her mouth. "He said girls like me should be grateful for the attention." The cold thing in Dante's chest moved. "Girls like you," he repeated. "Yeah." She said it without flinching, which was almost worse. Like she'd heard it so many times it had stopped being a wound and become just a fact. A fact she moved around, the way you move around furniture in a dark room you've learned by memory. That's the phrase. Dr. Voss arrived 18 minutes later. Dante stepped out of the room and stood in the corridor while she was examined, and he did something he hadn't done in a long time. He stood completely still and thought. 2 cracked ribs, it turned out. A bruised cheekbone. Contusions on both forearms where she'd tried to protect herself. Dr. Voss was thorough and quiet and professional, and when he came out he handed Dante a folded piece of paper with the injuries listed and said only, "She's going to need rest, and probably someone to talk to." He paused. "She wouldn't tell me exactly what happened." "I know," Dante said. "Was it?" "Yes," Dante said. He didn't need the question finished. Dr. Voss nodded once, slowly, and left. Dante went back in. Nia was sitting the same way, perched, hands in her lap, like she might need to leave quickly. She'd been given something for the pain and her eyes were slightly steadier than before, but her face still carried that particular expression he was starting to recognize, the one that said, "I'm waiting for the next bad thing." "You can stay here tonight," Dante said, "or I can have someone drive you somewhere safe, whatever you prefer." She looked at him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. And it wasn't suspicious, not quite. It was something more tired than that, more genuine, like she actually wanted to understand and wasn't sure she was going to like the answer. Dante considered lying. He was good at it. He'd built entire structures out of carefully managed half-truths. But something about the way she was looking at him, like she'd already survived someone's lie tonight and could recognize the shape of another one coming, made him leave the lie where it was. "I don't have a clean answer," he said. She waited. "I saw you in the alley," he said slowly. "And something—" He stopped. Tried again. "I've been in rooms all night full of people who have everything, and every single one of them was trying to take something from someone who had less. And then I walked out and saw you and—" He stopped again. He was not a man who fumbled words. The fumbling bothered him. "I just didn't want to be one more person who walked past," he said. The room was quiet. Nia looked at him for a long time. Then she looked at the floor. Then, very quietly, almost to herself, she said, Nobody ever comes back for women like me. It was the saddest thing Dante Romano had ever heard in a building he owned. And he had heard a lot of sad things in a lot of buildings he owned. He didn't say anything in response. There wasn't anything to say. He just sat with it. The weight of that sentence, the years it contained, the absolute matter-of-fact certainty in her voice, and he let it settle into him the way only true things settle. Later, much later, he would understand that this was the moment. Not the alley, not the name Conor Gallagher, not the list of injuries on a folded piece of paper. This sentence. Nobody ever comes back for women like me. That was where it started. You can have the room, he said finally. The door locks from the inside. I'll be down the hall. If you need anything. He stood, moved toward the door. Mr. Romano, she said. He turned. She was looking at him with those eyes, still careful, still measuring. But something in them had shifted very slightly. Not trust. Not yet. Something smaller than trust and more fragile. Thank you, she said. He nodded once. Then he walked into the corridor and stood there in the quiet for a moment. And for the first time in 11 years, he thought about what it would cost to break a treaty. And he found that he didn't particularly care. Dante didn't sleep that night. Not unusual. Sleep had been a negotiation for him since his mid-30s, something he had to bargain with his own brain for, and the brain didn't always cooperate. But this particular sleeplessness was different from the standard kind. It had a shape to it, a name attached. Conor Gallagher. He sat at the small desk in the corridor office, the one nobody used except him, the one with the bad lamp and the drawer that stuck. And he did what he always did when something needed thinking through. He sat completely still, and he let it move through him. All of it. The alley. The way she flinched. The torn sleeve he hadn't mentioned because he hadn't wanted to make her feel looked at. The list of injuries in Dr. Voss's handwriting. 2 cracked ribs. Bruised cheekbone. Contusions on both forearms. Both forearms. She'd tried to protect herself. She'd fought back with whatever she had. And Conor Gallagher had walked back inside to finish his drink. Dante put his hands flat on the desk and looked at them for a moment. Then he picked up his phone and called a number he didn't call often. It rang 4 times, which meant the man on the other end was either asleep or pretending to be. Either way, he picked up. "It's 2 in the morning," said the voice. "I know what time it is, Vincent." A pause. The sound of someone sitting up, sheets moving. Vincent Murata had been Dante's underboss for 9 years and had developed an accurate internal alarm system for when a 2 in the morning call was routine inconvenience versus something else entirely. His voice shifted. "What happened?" "Conor Gallagher put a woman in the hospital tonight," Dante said. "She's not in a hospital because she didn't go to one. She's here." Silence. Here as in my building, Vincent, in the back room. Dr. Voss just left." Another silence, longer this time. Dante. The way he said this name carried about 14 different things inside it. Concern, calculation, the particular wariness of a man who had spent 9 years managing consequences. "Tell me it wasn't one of ours." "She's a waitress from the Gallagher Casino. She said no to Conor. He followed her out back and—" Dante stopped. "You can fill in the rest." "Mother of—" Vincent cut himself off. "How bad?" "Bad enough." "Does anyone know she's with you?" "Not yet." "Okay." The word came out slow, careful. "Okay, we need to— Dante, listen to me. We need to think about this very carefully before we— I know. The treaty. I know, Vincent. 11 years. 11 years without a single— I said I know." Dante's voice didn't rise. It never rose. That was the thing about Dante Romano that unsettled people more than shouting would have. The absolute stillness of it. The way the temperature in his voice dropped instead of climbing. "I'm not calling you to discuss the treaty. I'm calling because by tomorrow morning, Conor is going to notice she's gone, and I want to know everything about his movements before he does." Vincent was quiet for a moment. "You're going to protect her." It wasn't a question. "Yes," Dante said, "even if it costs us— Yes." The silence that followed was the kind that meant a man was reorganizing everything he understood about a situation. Dante let him have it. Vincent had earned the right to a moment. All right, Vincent said finally. "I'll make calls." "Quietly." "When am I not quiet?" Thank you, Vincent. He hung up, put the phone face down on the desk, looked at the bad lamp for a while. In the back room, behind a door locked from the inside, a woman he'd met 40 minutes ago was sleeping on his couch with two cracked ribs and the absolute unshakable certainty that no one was coming back for her. Dante Romano, who had not felt certain about anything personal in a very long time, found that he was certain about exactly one thing. She was wrong. Morning arrived the way November mornings do in New York, gray and graceless and not particularly apologetic about it. Dante had changed into clothes kept at the club for overnight situations, and when Nia emerged from the back room at just past 8, she found him at the small kitchen counter with 2 cups of coffee and a box of pastries from the all-night place 3 blocks over that he'd had Marcus pick up at 6. She stopped in the doorway. She'd slept in her uniform because she had nothing else, and there was something about that, the gold trim slightly wrinkled, the name tag still pinned crookedly to her chest, that landed in Dante's sternum like a quiet punch. She was looking at the coffee the way people look at things they want, but aren't sure they're allowed to want. "Sit down," he said. Then, "Please." She sat. She took the coffee without being told which one was hers, which told him she was someone who made small decisions decisively even when everything else was uncertain. She wrapped both hands around the cup and closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Just 3, like she'd rationed herself, and then opened them again. "How are the ribs?" he asked. "They exist," she said. "That's not an answer." "It's the answer I have." She picked up a pastry, looked at it, set it back down. "I need to get back. I have a shift at 4, and if I don't show—" "You're not going back to the casino," Dante said. She looked at him. "Excuse me?" "Not today. Not until I understand what Conor Gallagher's next move is." "I don't work for you," she said. The voice was even, but her eyes had gone sharp. "I appreciate what you did last night. I do. But I have a job and bills, and I can't just—" "Nia." He said her name the same way he'd said it last night. Not soft, just steady. "Conor Gallagher is going to wake up this morning and realize his victim didn't go home last night. He's going to want to know where you are. And the first place he's going to look is your workplace." He paused. "If you walk back in there at 4 o'clock today, you are making yourself very easy to find." She stared at him. He could see it happening behind her eyes. The calculation she didn't want to be making, the fear she didn't want to feel, the anger at the fact that any of this was her problem to solve at all when she had been the one hurt. "This isn't fair," she said, quietly. Not complaining, just naming it, the way you name a fact. "No," he said, "it isn't." She looked at the pastry again. This time she ate it. By 10 in the morning, Vincent Marotta was sitting across from Dante in the main office upstairs, and the expression on his face was the one Dante had learned to read as "it's worse than we thought." Vincent was 53 years old and had the kind of face that had been weathered into something almost architectural. All angles and deep lines, nothing soft, nothing that hadn't been earned. He'd been with the Romano family since before Dante took over, and he had a particular way of delivering bad news that was almost gentle in its efficiency. He didn't soften it, he just handed it over clean, the way you'd hand someone a letter you wished you didn't have to deliver. He put a photograph on the desk. Dante looked at it. Conor Gallagher, 28. Sandy-haired, broad-shouldered, the kind of handsome that came from generations of money and never being hungry. He was smiling in the photo, the way men smile when they're somewhere they own. "He was seen leaving the casino at 11:47 last night," Vincent said. "Security footage puts him in the parking structure at 11:52. He drove himself. No driver, which is unusual for him." He paused. "There's a gap between 11:30 and 11:40 where the back hallway cameras were offline." "Offline how?" "2 of the kitchen staff independently reported a maintenance issue with the corridor system that evening. The Gallagher security team filed a report, but—" Vincent tilted his head slightly. "The report was filed at 11:58, 7 minutes after Conor left the building. They covered it." "They covered it," Vincent confirmed, "which means at least 2 or 3 people in that building know what happened, and all of them are looking out for Conor." Dante leaned back in his chair. "And the girl? The witnesses? Anyone who saw him follow her out?" 3 of the wait staff were in the corridor when he grabbed her arm. "We have names." Vincent paused again. None of them have spoken to police. One of them called in sick this morning. Scared. Extremely. Dante looked at the photograph again. At the smile. Where is he now? Brunch at his father's house in Westchester. Vincent's jaw moved slightly. A tell that Dante had learned meant the older man was deciding how to phrase something. Patrick Gallagher knows, he said, or at least suspects. There were 3 calls between Connor's phone and the family estate between midnight and 1 in the morning. Patrick cleaned it up for him before. 3 times that we know of, all quieted, all local, nothing that crossed into our territory or touched our operations. Vincent folded his hands on the desk. This is the first time Connor has gone after someone connected to our side of the city. She's not connected to our side, Dante said. She works at their casino. She spent the night in your building, Dante. Vincent's voice carried no judgment, just the fact. By morning, that is a connection whether we intended it or not. The room was quiet for a moment. He's going to come at us, Dante said. He's going to come at you, specifically. Vincent reached into the folder and put down a second sheet, a printed transcript, phone intercepts, the kind of thing that took money and the right people to obtain. This came in an hour ago. One of our people inside the Gallagher Communications picked it up. Dante read it. It was short. A text exchange between 2 numbers, one of which Vincent had already flagged as belonging to a Gallagher lieutenant named Briggs. The other number was unfamiliar. She went somewhere. Find out where. Connor wants her back before the old man finds out what she said to anyone. Back how? Doesn't matter how. Dante set the paper down on the desk with the same care he would use to set down something fragile. She said, he repeated quietly, she hasn't said anything to anyone. She hasn't been to the police. She hasn't called anyone that we know of. No, Vincent said. They don't know that. No, they're operating on worst-case assumption. Which means from Connor's perspective, she's already a threat whether or not she's done anything. Dante looked at the ceiling for a moment, then back at Vincent. He's not just trying to silence her. He's trying to erase the night. Yes. Dante stood up, moved to the window, looked at the gray street below. Move her, he said. To where? The safe house in Greenpoint. The one off McGinnis. Not the one anyone knows about, the other one. That place hasn't been used in 2 years. Which is why we're using it now, today, before noon. He turned from the window. I want Marcus driving her personally. No phones active in the car. No stops. Vincent didn't move yet. He had the look of a man who had more to say and was deciding whether to say it. Dante, he said, the elders are going to want a meeting. I know. They're going to say she's not worth... I know what they're going to say, Vincent. They're going to say give her back. Let Connor handle his own mess quietly. Maintain the treaty. He held Dante's gaze steadily. This was what Dante valued most about Vincent. The man would look you in the eye when he was telling you something difficult. He never looked away. They're not going to be wrong from a certain angle. And from another angle? Vincent was quiet for a moment. From another angle, a 28-year-old man with his father's name and his father's money put a woman in an alley with broken ribs and then tried to disappear her. He paused. And from that angle, if we hand her back, we are the same thing he is. Dante looked at him. Vincent almost never said things like that. He was a numbers man, a logistics man, a man who thought in terms of percentages and leverage and acceptable loss. To hear that sentence come out of his mouth with that particular weight behind it meant he'd been sitting with it since 2 in the morning, and he'd decided it mattered. Set up the meeting, Dante said. Tonight, 7 o'clock. And what do I tell them before the meeting? Tell them the situation is being managed. They'll want more than that. They'll get more than that at 7 o'clock. Dante moved toward the door. Right now I need to talk to her. She was still in the back room when he came downstairs. She'd found a notepad somewhere, the kind left in desk drawers for no particular reason. And she was writing something on it, fast and focused, the pen moving in short, decisive lines. She stopped when he came in but didn't cover the paper, which meant she wasn't embarrassed by it, just present. What's that? He asked. She looked at it like she'd half forgotten. A recipe, she said. I do it when I'm... She stopped. It's a habit. My grandmother used to say that if you can still make something, you're still okay. Dante stood in the doorway for a moment looking at the notepad. What recipe? Caramel cake. She said it slightly defensively, like she expected him to have an opinion about it. He didn't. "We need to move you," he said. Her shoulders drew together. Not quite a flinch, but the precursor to one. "Move me where?" "Somewhere safer than here. There are people looking for you." He watched her face carefully. "Connor doesn't know you're here, but he knows you're somewhere, and he has people asking questions." "He's looking for me." She said it flatly. Not surprised. Something worse than surprised. Confirmed. Like she'd known this was coming and had been bracing for the specific shape of it. "Of course he is." "He thinks—" Dante paused, edited himself. "He's worried about what you might say to someone." "I haven't said anything to anyone. I didn't go to the police. She stopped. Her voice had stayed level through all of it, right up until that last word, and then something in it shifted, just slightly, just for a second, into something raw. "I just wanted to go home." "I know. I just wanted to go home," she said again. And this time the rawness cracked through fully, not into crying exactly, but into the thing before crying, the thing people do when they're running on no sleep and pain medication, and the specific exhaustion of having to keep being afraid. "I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask for him to follow me. I didn't ask for— Nia!" Dante crossed the room and crouched down in front of the couch. Not touching, just close, level with her eyes. "I know you didn't. None of this is on you. None of it." She pressed her lips together, hard, held it. "I need you to trust me for a little while longer," he said. "I know that's a lot to ask from someone you just met. I know you don't have a real reason to." He paused. "But I'm asking anyway." She looked at him. "What happens after?" she asked. "After the safe house? After—" She gestured vaguely. "What does the rest of this look like?" He was honest with her. He owed her that. "I don't know exactly," he said. "I know that Connor Gallagher is not going to be a problem for you indefinitely. I know that you are not going back to that casino. Beyond that—" He paused. I'm working on the rest." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded. Slow. Once. The nod of someone who has decided to extend a trust they're not fully sure they can afford to extend, and knows it, and is doing it anyway because the alternative is worse. "Okay," she said. The meeting happened at 7 o'clock in the back room of a restaurant in Bensonhurst that had been Romano territory since before Dante was born. 6 men around a table. Old wood, bad lighting, good wine that nobody was drinking much of. Sal Marchetti spoke first because Sal Marchetti always spoke first. He was 71 years old and had the moral authority of a man who had survived things that would have broken anyone younger, and he used that authority like a tool, not carelessly, but not gently either. "Tell me I'm misunderstanding the situation," Sal said. "You're not," Dante said. "You took in a Gallagher girl." "She's not a Gallagher girl. She works at their casino. She's nobody's girl." Sal's eyes moved across the table, checking the other faces, then back to Dante. "You took in a woman from Gallagher territory who was assaulted by Connor Gallagher, and instead of handing her back to their people to deal with quietly, you've hidden her in one of our safe houses." "That's accurate, yes. And this doesn't strike you as— Sal." Dante put his hands flat on the table. It was a gesture the older man recognized. It meant, I'm not going to raise my voice, but I am done being patient. That woman has 2 cracked ribs. She has bruises on both arms from trying to keep a man twice her size off of her. She spent 2 hours in a rain-soaked alley alone because she had nowhere to go and no one she thought would help her. He looked around the table, at each face in turn. "You want me to hand her back to the family of the man who did that to her so they can deal with it quietly?" Nobody spoke. "I want you to think about what quietly means in that sentence," Dante said. The silence around the table was the heavy kind, the kind that meant people were doing math they didn't enjoy. "Patrick Gallagher called me this afternoon," said a man named Ferrara from the far end of the table. He was quieter than Sal, which usually meant what he said carried more weight. He was— Ferrara chose the word carefully— concerned about the treaty. "He called to threaten us," Dante said. "He called to express concern." "Ferrara." Dante looked at him directly. "Patrick Gallagher's son assaulted a woman last night. Patrick Gallagher spent this morning making sure the casino security footage wouldn't surface. And this afternoon, Patrick Gallagher called to express concern about a treaty." He paused. "He's not worried about the treaty. He's worried about his son. The treaty is what he's using as a lever. Ferrara was quiet. We give her up, said a younger voice, Tommy Ricci, who had no business speaking in this room but had been brought by Sal and sometimes forgot that meant he was there to listen. And the whole thing goes away. Connor's problem, Connor's mess. We stay out of it, and the treaty holds. Dante looked at him. Tommy Ricci had the grace to stop talking. The treaty holds, Dante said slowly, because both sides agree that some things are off limits, that there are lines. He looked at Sal, because Sal was the one who mattered in this room. If we hand her over right now, what we are saying is that the line doesn't include a woman alone in an alley, that the line doesn't include... He stopped. Started differently. I am not doing that. Sal looked at him for a long time. The old man's face was unreadable in the way that old faces sometimes get, all the readable parts worn down by years, until what was left was just the essential thing. This is about the girl, he said finally. Or is it about Connor? Both, Dante said. Be honest. I am being honest. Both. Dante held the old man's gaze. She deserves protection, and Connor Gallagher has operated for 28 years believing his name was a permission slip. Both of those things are true at the same time. Sal reached for his wine, drank, set the glass back down with the precision of a man who is thinking about something else while his hands moved. And if Patrick pushes back hard, if this becomes, then it becomes that, Dante said. The room went quiet again. You're sure? Sal asked. About what? About her. About this being worth what it might cost. Dante looked at the table for a moment, then looked up. She sat in my building last night and told me that nobody ever comes back for women like her. He paused. Let it sit there. I don't want to be the reason she was right. Nobody argued after that. Not even Tommy Ricci. At 9:15 that same evening, Dante's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. He almost didn't answer. He answered. Mr. Romano. The voice was young, male, slightly unsteady, which meant either fear or anger, and this particular unsteadiness had the sharp edge of anger trying to sound like confidence. I think you have something of mine. Dante said nothing. The woman from the casino, Connor Gallagher said. I know she's with you. I want her back. Dante stood at the window of his office, looking down at the street. A cab went by. Then another. Normal Tuesday night city sounds. He let the silence stretch for a full 8 seconds. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. Don't. Connor's voice lost a layer of the attempted composure. Don't do that. We both know exactly what I'm talking about. She works in my building, she's nobody, and whatever she told you, nobody, Dante repeated, quietly. Is a complete fabrication, she's a lying... Nobody, Dante said again. Same tone, same register. That's what you just called her. Silence on the line. Mr. Gallagher, Dante said, I'm going to give you some advice that you are almost certainly not going to take. Don't call this number again. You're making a mistake. I make mistakes all the time. This one I'm comfortable with. Dante paused. Have a good night. He hung up. Stood at the window for another moment. The cab sounds continued. The city didn't know anything had changed, but something had. Something had shifted into place, or out of place, or both. Some arrangement that had held for 11 years had developed a crack, and the crack had a name, and the name was not Connor Gallagher's. The name was Nia Brooks. Dante put his phone in his pocket and reached for his coat, because he already knew what was coming next, and unlike Connor Gallagher, he intended to be ready for it. Dante made 3 calls before he left the building. The first was to Marcus, telling him to stay with the car and stay off the radio. The second was to a man named Ortega, who ran a small but precise intelligence operation out of a laundromat in Sunset Park. Dante told him to pull everything on Connor Gallagher's movements for the last 72 hours and have it ready by morning. The third call was to the safe house in Greenpoint, a number that rang to a disposable phone held by one of his most trusted men, a quiet giant named Reeves, who communicated primarily in single syllables and had never once in 11 years said anything that turned out to be wrong. She settled? Dante asked. Yeah, Reeves said. Anyone come near the block? 1 car. Wrong plates. Did a loop and left. Dante's hand tightened slightly on his phone. What time? 8:40. 25 minutes ago. Stay awake, he said. Always, Reeves said, and hung up. Dante stood in the cold outside the restaurant for a moment, not moving. The street was ordinary. A woman walking a dog. Two kids on the corner doing nothing in particular. A bodega with its lights too bright spilling yellow onto the sidewalk. Everything exactly as it should look, which was exactly the kind of normal that Dante had learned over 20 years to distrust most. He got in the car. Greenpoint, he told Marcus. Marcus didn't ask why. That was what Dante valued most about him. The safe house was the upper floor of a narrow building sandwiched between a plumbing supply company and a place that repaired appliances nobody repaired anymore. From the street, it looked like nothing. That was the point. Dante had acquired it 8 years ago through 3 layers of shell companies for exactly the purpose of looking like absolutely nothing. Reeves met him at the door, a big man, patient-eyed, who stepped aside without a word and tilted his head toward the back room. "She's awake," he said. "Hasn't eaten much. Keeps writing in that notepad." "The recipes." Reeves looked at him. "Recipes?" "Don't worry about it." She was at the small table in the back room, the notepad in front of her, but she wasn't writing. She was sitting with the pen in her hand and her eyes on the middle distance, doing the thing people do when they're not actually looking at anything in the room, thinking through something that wasn't in the room. She looked up when he came in. Her eyes went to his face first and then, quickly and almost involuntarily, to his hands, checking whether he was carrying anything, whether his posture was tight. He recognized the reflex. He'd seen it in people who'd been in dangerous situations long enough to start reading doorways. "You didn't have to come back tonight," she said. "I know. I mean it. Reeves is here. I'm fine. You didn't—" "I made a phone call an hour ago," Dante said, pulling out the chair across from her and sitting down. "Connor Gallagher called me." She went very still. "He knows you're with me," Dante said. "He doesn't know exactly where, but he knows the direction." "How?" "I don't know yet." He kept his voice even, watching her face. She was scared. He could see it in the set of her jaw, the slight change in her breathing. But she was holding it, not performing calm, actually working to maintain it, which was different. "We had a short conversation. He called you nobody." Something moved through her face. A ripple. There and gone. "That's not exactly news." "I know. I'm telling you because I want you to know exactly what he thinks this is." Dante leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table. "He thinks this is a retrieval problem. He thinks you're an object that got misplaced and needs to be returned. He's not thinking about you as a person who made choices. He's thinking about you as a loose end." "And what are you thinking?" she asked. The question was quiet but direct. She had a way of asking direct things that most people would soften or circle around, and he'd noticed it from the first night. The way she'd asked, "Why are you doing this?" without preamble or apology. "I'm thinking," Dante said carefully, "that loose ends are actually in a stronger position than they know, because loose ends make people careless." She looked at him for a moment. "You're going to use this." "I'm going to protect you," he said. "Using it is part of that." "There's a difference." "Yes," he said. "There is. Both things are true." She looked down at the notepad, turned the pen over in her fingers once. "What happens if you can't protect me?" He should have said something reassuring. He knew what the reassuring answer was. He'd said reassuring things to people in difficult situations many times in his life, and he was good at them, and they were usually at least partially true. "Then we find a different plan," he said instead. "But I don't think we'll need one." She looked at him. "You sound very sure of yourself." "I'm sure of enough things to be useful," he said. "I'm not sure of everything. I try not to lie about the difference." She seemed to think about that. Then she picked up the notepad and slid it across the table to him. He looked down at it. Densely written recipes, the caramel cake from before, and below it something with cardamom, and below that a bread recipe with margin notes in the tightly controlled handwriting of someone who'd learned to economize space. "My grandmother's recipes," she said. "I don't have them written anywhere permanent. I keep rewriting them from memory." "Why?" "Because she told me that as long as I could still make her food, some part of her would still be in the room." She took the notepad back. "She died when I was 19. I didn't handle it well." "I'm sorry." "You don't have to be sorry. You didn't know her." She paused. "I'm telling you because you asked what I would do after all this. And I think, if there's an after, I want to do something with her recipes. Something real. She looked up. Is that stupid? No, he said. You didn't even think about it. I didn't need to. She held his gaze for a moment and something in it shifted, not warmer exactly, but less guarded, just fractionally. The way a door that's been held shut for a long time moves slightly in a draft. Go home, she said, or wherever you go. I'm not going to fall apart overnight. I know you're not, he said. Then stop looking at me like I might. He almost smiled. Almost. Good night, Nia. Good night, Mr. Romano. He was at the door when she spoke again. He really called me nobody? Dante stopped, turned back. Yes. She nodded once, slowly, like she was putting something away in a particular drawer inside herself. Okay, she said. I just wanted to hear it said out loud. He didn't ask why. He thought he understood. The call came at 4:53 in the morning. Dante was at his own apartment, actually in bed, actually asleep for once, which might have been why the phone woke him so abruptly that he knocked it off the nightstand, grabbing it. He had it to his ear before he was fully upright, and he could tell from the first syllable that something was wrong. It was Vincent. We have a problem, Vincent said. Those 4 words from Vincent Murata at 4:53 in the morning carried the specific weight of a structural failure. Not a complication, not an inconvenience, a structural failure. Tell me, Dante said. He was already standing, already moving toward the closet. It's Reeves. Dante stopped moving. He's alive, Vincent said quickly. I want to say that first. He's alive, but he's in a bad way, and she... Vincent stopped. The pause lasted 1 second, 2, 3. Vincent Murata did not pause. In 9 years, Dante had never heard him pause. She's gone, Dante. They took her. The room did not spin. Dante's rooms did not spin. He was not the kind of man whose rooms spun. But something happened in his chest that was deeply structural. Something load-bearing gave way, silently, with the particular violence of collapse that happens on the inside where no one can see it. How? He said. Not a question. A demand. Corrupt officers. 2 of them, we think. Badge numbers we haven't confirmed yet. They came in through the ground floor at approximately 4:15. Reeves was hit from behind. He didn't hear them coming, Dante. He should have heard them coming. Something was wrong from... Someone told them the layout, Dante said. Silence on Vincent's end. Someone told them which building, which floor, which room. Dante pulled on his coat over his shirt, not fully dressed. He didn't care. Someone in our organization told them. Dante? Don't tell me I'm wrong, Vincent. Don't tell me to slow down. Someone gave them the safe house and the floor plan and the shift timing. His voice was still level. That was the terrible thing about it. Still level, still controlled, the same temperature it always was. But Vincent knew. After 9 years, Vincent knew exactly what that specific levelness meant, and it was not reassurance. Who knew the Greenpoint location? 6 people, Vincent said immediately. You, me, Marcus, Reeves, Tommy Ricci, and Ferrara's man D'Souza who drove her over. Tommy Ricci, Dante said. Dante. We don't know. Tommy Ricci spoke out of turn at the meeting last night and then sat there watching everyone else's face while they responded. Dante was moving now, heading for the door. He wanted to give her back. He said so directly. And then he went quiet when no one agreed with him, and I didn't think about what quiet means on a man like that. That's not proof. I know it's not proof. He was in the hallway now, moving toward the stairs. Where's Reeves? He called it in himself. He's at a private clinic off Atlantic Avenue. Dr. Voss is with him. Concussion, maybe worse. They got him from behind with something heavy. The officers, the 2 that came in, any trace? Gone. Plates on the car were reported stolen out of Queens 6 weeks ago. Vincent's voice shifted slightly. This was planned, Dante. This wasn't Connor making an angry call and sending whoever was available. Someone planned this. They had the location, they had the timing, they had the route in and the route out. This was organized before you even called Connor last night. Dante stopped walking, stood in the stairwell, played it back. Connor had called him at 9:15, confident, steady, beneath the anger. I think you have something of mine. Not I'm looking for her. Not do you know where she is. He had said, I think you have something of mine, which meant he hadn't needed to ask whether Dante had her. He'd known before the call. He'd known before the call and he'd made the call anyway, which meant the call wasn't about finding out information. The call was a distraction. While Dante was standing at the window of his office listening to Connor's voice, someone was driving toward Greenpoint with a stolen plate and a floor plan. He used the phone call, Dante said, mostly to himself. What? He called me last night to keep me on the phone, to keep me in one place and thinking about him while his people moved. Dante's hand tightened on the railing. I stayed on the line for 3 minutes. 3 minutes of telling him not to call this number again while they were already heading to McGinnis Boulevard. You couldn't have known. I should have known. The words came out flat and unforgiving. I know what misdirection looks like. I have built entire operations on misdirection. I should have heard it in his voice, and I didn't, because I was angry, and anger makes you want to win the conversation instead of see it. Dante, where is she? His voice had dropped an octave. Not quieter, lower, more fundamental. Where would Connor take her? Not his apartment, not the casino, not anything connected to the Gallagher family directly. He's not stupid enough to take her somewhere traceable. Where? We're working on it. Work faster. Dante. Vincent's voice changed again, harder, more insistent, the voice he used when he'd decided something needed to be said, regardless of whether it was welcome. I need you to stop moving for 30 seconds and listen to me. Dante stopped moving. I think we have a leak, Vincent said. I think we have a leak in our organization, which means I cannot put together a response team without knowing which men might be connected. I cannot use our standard channels. I cannot. If we move wrong right now, we're not just failing to get her back. We are potentially walking our own men into something designed to kill them. Silence in the stairwell. I know, Dante said. Do you? Because you sound like a man who wants to drive to every building in Brooklyn until he finds her. That's not what I'm going to do. Tell me what you're going to do. Dante thought. Not long, 30 seconds, maybe less, but real thought. The kind that moved fast and clean because the situation had stripped away everything except necessity. I need 3 men, not 6, not 12. 3 men I trust with my life and can account for their whereabouts last night. I need Ortega working his intelligence channels to find out where Connor's family has property that doesn't appear on anything public. And I need someone to pick up Tommy Ricci. And do what with him? Bring him somewhere quiet. I want to talk to him. Dante, I said talk, Vincent. I want to talk to him. Another pause. All right, Vincent said. All right, but there's one more thing. Tell me. Ferrara called me 20 minutes ago. He heard something happened at the safe house. He wants an emergency meeting, this morning. Tell Ferrara. He said if you don't come, he's calling Patrick Gallagher directly. Vincent's voice was careful now, precise in the way of a man handling something he knows is fragile. He said the treaty cannot survive another 12 hours of this, and he needs to be in the room when a decision is made. Dante stood in the stairwell and breathed. Ferrara was not wrong about the treaty. Ferrara was not wrong about the urgency. Ferrara was possibly even doing what he thought was the right thing, trying to stop an escalation before it became something that couldn't be undone. And if Ferrara called Patrick Gallagher directly, without Dante in the room, whatever was said would set a direction that couldn't be walked back. But every hour he spent in a meeting room was an hour Nia Brooks was somewhere he didn't know. Tell Ferrara 10 o'clock, he said. Tell him I'll be there. Tell him nothing else. He hung up. Stood in the stairwell for another moment in the dark. He thought about the call with Connor, the 3 minutes on the phone, the window, the cab sounds, the perfectly ordinary Tuesday night street below him while everything moved without him. He thought about Nia's face when he'd told her Connor called her nobody. I just wanted to hear it said out loud. He'd thought he understood that. Now standing in his own stairwell in a shirt he'd thrown on without buttoning it properly, he understood it more completely. There is a specific grief in having a thing confirmed that you already knew, a specific weight in the moment when suspicion becomes certainty. Nia had spent years carrying the suspicion that the world had decided she was disposable, and last night some part of her was making peace with the confirmation. He had told her she was wrong. He had been so certain she was wrong, and then he'd gone home and gone to sleep while they came for her. Tommy Ricci was at his apartment in Carroll Gardens, which meant he hadn't left the city. That was either innocence or confidence, and Dante was not in the mood to guess which. He arrived with two men, not Romano soldiers, not anyone from the standard operation. A man named Chen, who'd done private security work for three of New York's quieter operators, and owed Dante a favor from 4 years ago, and a woman named Petra, who was small and unremarkable looking and had the stillest eyes Dante had ever seen on a person who wasn't dead. Tommy Ricci opened his own door, which meant he hadn't been warned. He was in pajamas and had clearly been asleep, and when he saw Dante standing in the hallway at 6 in the morning with Chen and Petra flanking him, his face went through 3 different expressions in under 2 seconds. Surprise, fear, and then the third one, the one Dante was looking for, calculation, not confusion, not anger, not the baffled outrage of a man who doesn't know why 3 people are at his door at 6 in the morning, calculation. Dante, Tommy said, working for casual and landing somewhere adjacent. What's going on? Can we come in? Dante said. It wasn't a question. Tommy stepped back. The apartment was the apartment of a man who had more money than he'd had 2 years ago and hadn't yet figured out how to wear it comfortably. New furniture, ill-fitting, expensive things placed without understanding of what made expensive things look right, rather than just expensive. Dante sat down on the couch without being invited. Petra remained standing by the door. Chen drifted to the side of the room in the way that people with Chen's training drift, almost imperceptibly, until they're positioned exactly where they intended to be. Tommy stood in the middle of his own living room and couldn't decide where to put his hands. She's gone, Dante said. Tommy's face arranged itself into concern. What? Who? You know who. Dante's voice had not changed in tune or temperature since the stairwell. That same fundamental low register. They came in at 4:15 this morning, 2 officers with stolen plates and a floor plan. He watched Tommy's face. A floor plan of a building that 6 people knew about. Dante, I don't know what... Stop. The word landed like a closed door. I've been talking to people for 20 years, Tommy. I know what the face looks like when someone is trying to remember their story. Dante leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes on Tommy's. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here because a woman is in danger and I need to know where Connor Gallagher took her, and right now you are the most direct line to that information. So I need you to stop performing surprise for me and start talking. Tommy's mouth worked for a moment. His hands had found each other somewhere around his waist and were doing something nervous. His eyes moved, to Petra, to Chen, to Dante, and back. The route of a man mapping his options and finding them limited. I didn't know they were going to take her, he said. His voice had changed. The performance was gone, and what was underneath was smaller and younger and genuinely frightened. I swear to you, Dante, I gave them the location because they told me they just wanted to talk to her, just to talk, to convince her not to say anything. You gave Gallagher's people the location of our safe house, Dante said. They said it would end the whole thing. They said give them the location, they'd go talk to her, she'd agree to stay quiet, and the treaty holds and everyone goes back to normal. She has 2 cracked ribs, Tommy. The younger man went very still. She was already assaulted once. You gave the man who assaulted her location in the middle of the night. Dante's voice had gone quieter, not softer, quieter. The distinction mattered. Do you understand what you did? Tommy Ricci's face crumpled. Not dramatically, not the collapse of someone performing regret, but the smaller, more honest crumpling of someone who had told themselves a story about what they were doing and had just, in this moment, been forced to see the story for what it was. I know you didn't think, Dante said. That's the problem. He stood up. Where would Connor take her? Not family property, not anything traceable, somewhere off book. I don't know. Tommy. Petra's voice came from the door, quiet and completely flat, the way silence sounds when it's about to become something else. Tommy turned toward her. She was just standing there, still as furniture, but something about the stillness had shifted into a different register. Where? Tommy looked at her for a moment, then at Dante. There's a warehouse, he said, on the Gallagher freight side, out in Maspeth. They used it for storage. It's been empty since a fire 2 years ago that damaged the east wing, so they took it off the books. Connor used it once before when he stopped. When he what? Dante said. When he had a problem he needed to make disappear quietly, Tommy said. Each word cost him something. About 3 years ago. I heard it from D'Souza. He never told me details. Dante looked at him for a long moment. You're going to write down everything you know about that warehouse, he said. The address, the access points, anything D'Souza told you. Everything. He reached into his coat and put a pen on the table. And then you are going to sit in this apartment and not make a single phone call. Not to the Gallaghers, not to Ferrara, not to your mother. He held Tommy's gaze. Because if I get to Maspeth and find something worse than I'm expecting because someone made a call, I will know exactly who made it. Do you understand me? Yes, Tommy said, barely audible. Do you understand me, Tommy? Yes, he said again, louder, more present, the word of a man who has finally understood the full weight of the situation he is sitting in. Yes, Dante, I understand. Dante picked up the pen and held it out. Tommy took it and began to write. The drive to Maspeth was 23 minutes. Dante sat in the back with the paper Tommy had written on and a satellite image Ortega had pulled within minutes of Dante calling him from the car. The warehouse, large and rectangular and partially collapsed on the east side where the fire had been, a chain-link perimeter, 2 visible vehicle access points, and Ortega's voice had been careful when he said this. 3 cars parked on the south side of the building that had not been there at the time of the most recent Google image. 3 cars. Not one. Not a quick extraction team. 3 cars, which meant people. Which meant Connor hadn't just grabbed her and stashed her. Connor had assembled something, had prepared for something. Dante's phone rang. Vincent. I see the image, Vincent said. He'd been copied on Ortega's communication. Dante, this is not a retrieval. This is a setup. 3 cars, Maspeth location, no visibility. If you drive up to that building, you are walking into a prepared position. I know, Dante said. Then you need to stop the car. And I'm not stopping the car, Vincent. Dante, she's in that building right now. His voice was absolutely steady. And Connor Gallagher is in that building right now. And everything I know about Connor Gallagher tells me that a woman alone and hurt, with 2 cracked ribs in a building full of his men, is running out of time. He looked out the window. Industrial Brooklyn sliding past in the early morning gray. So I'm not stopping the car. I'm adjusting. A long pause. What do you need? Vincent said. Everything you can get to Maspeth in 15 minutes, Dante said. Quietly, back roads, nobody in uniform, nobody loud. He paused. And Vincent, only people you watched last night. Only people you can account for personally. Understood, Vincent said. The line stayed open, but neither of them spoke again. The car moved through the gray morning, and Dante sat in the back with Tommy Ricci's handwritten notes on his knee and thought about a woman rewriting her grandmother's recipes from memory in a room she didn't choose, in a city that had decided a long time ago it didn't need to see her. He thought about what she'd said. Nobody ever comes back for women like me. He was 11 minutes away from the warehouse in Maspeth, and every cell in his body had reorganized itself around a single point. He was coming back. 11 minutes became 9 because Marcus drove the way he drove when Dante didn't tell him to be careful. Fast and without hesitation, reading lights before they changed, threading gaps that shouldn't have been gaps. Dante spent those 9 minutes on the phone with Ortega, who was pulling everything available on the Maspeth warehouse in real time. Utility records, ownership transfers, any police activity in the surrounding blocks over the last 48 hours. What came back was thin but specific. The building had been transferred to a holding company called Iron Gate Solutions in 2021, 2 months after the fire that had officially taken it off the Gallagher books. Iron Gate Solutions shared a registered agent address with 4 other shell entities, 2 of which had appeared in financial investigations of the Gallagher family that had been quietly closed by a federal prosecutor who had subsequently received a significant private sector job offer. 3 cameras on the exterior, Ortega said, south and east facing. The west approach has a blind spot between the collapsed section and the fence line, about 40 feet of it, maybe more. 40 feet is enough, Dante said. There's a loading dock on the north face. Exterior locks, but from the construction permits filed after the fire, the interior door was never replaced. It's a push bar, fire code. Which means it opens from the inside. Which means if someone were already inside and at that door, someone won't be, Dante said. But I'll keep it in mind. He ended the call. Looked at Marcus in the rear view. West approach. Stop 2 blocks out. Marcus nodded. Dante's phone buzzed. Vincent. 8 men. 4 minutes behind you. Using the McGowan freight entrance on the east side as a secondary. He typed back, hold east until you hear movement on the south. Don't initiate. He put the phone in his coat pocket, checked the weight of what was in his shoulder holster, thought, briefly, of nothing at all. The warehouse from the outside was exactly what it looked like on the satellite image. Large, gray, exhausted. The kind of building that had stopped being useful and hadn't yet been demolished, which in certain parts of certain cities could mean decades of waiting. The collapsed east wing had been partially cordoned with chain link that had since leaned inward from weather and nobody caring. The south face was where the cars were. Dante could see them from the corner of the block. 3 dark SUVs parked at angles that were not casual. Deliberate spacing. Someone had thought about sightlines. He went west. The blind spot Ortega had described was real. A shadow corridor between the buckled fence line and the standing section of the building's exterior wall, maybe 45 feet of it, maybe a little more. Dante moved through it without hurrying, not slow, not rushing. The specific pace of a man who has done this before and knows that speed without control is just noise. The cold was serious now, 6 in the morning, and his coat was unbuttoned from the stairwell, and he hadn't eaten since the pastries at the club the previous morning, and none of that particularly mattered because the body, when you ask it to do something that has stakes high enough, will defer the accounting. The cold would matter later. The hunger would matter later. Right now there was the wall and the fence and 45 feet of shadow and a loading dock on the north face with a fire code push bar. He reached the north side. The loading dock door was industrial, corrugated metal, rust at the lower corners, the push bar horizontal and slightly bowed from age. He pressed his palm flat against it and listened, from inside voices. Not words yet. Distance and concrete turning language into frequency without content, but he could count. 2 distinct registers, at least 2 people in the interior, possibly more further back. And below the voices, something else. A sound that was not a voice and not mechanical, and that landed in his chest in a way that made his jaw tighten. He pushed the bar. The door opened. The interior was cavernous and dim. A loading area that opened into the main floor, the ceiling 30 feet up and fitted with industrial lights that had been retrofitted at some point, some of them on and yellowing, some dead. The floor was concrete. Old stains, newer stains, the particular quality of emptiness that comes from a space that was built for activity and has been drained of it. He was inside before anyone at the south entrance could have seen him. 2 men near the south-facing doors, their backs partially to him, watching the exterior approach, exactly where they should be, and exactly as useless in that position as Dante had counted on. He moved along the interior wall, staying in the shadow of stacked equipment that had been left when the building went cold. Old conveyor frames, pallet racking, industrial debris that served him now as cover. The main floor opened ahead, and there, in the center of it, under the working lights, was a scene that Dante Romano had built his entire adult life around never being in the position of witnessing without the power to stop it. Nia was seated on a metal chair, not tied. They hadn't needed rope, apparently, because 2 men were flanking her at arm's length and she was sitting with her arms wrapped around her own ribs, the same position he'd seen her in the alley. And something about that specific repetition, that she was back in that position, protecting the same broken ribs in a different but essentially identical situation, moved through Dante's body like something electrical. Connor Gallagher was standing 6 feet in front of her. He was not shouting. That was the thing that Dante registered first and filed immediately. Connor was not shouting. He was talking in the particular moderate tone of a man who has decided that moderate tones make him seem reasonable, and the moderateness of it was somehow worse than shouting would have been. Really very simple, Connor was saying. You sign something saying nothing happened. We compensate you fairly. And then you go back to your life, which, I want to be honest with you, is not a life that needs this kind of trouble. Nia said nothing. I'm being generous here, Connor said. I want you to understand that. I'm giving you an exit that leaves you better off than you started. That's not nothing. I know what nothing is, Nia said. Her voice was steady, painfully, remarkably steady. And I know what this is, and they're not the same. Connor's moderate tone didn't waver. You're making this harder than it needs to be. You broke 2 of my ribs, she said. You don't get to tell me what's hard. Something moved through Connor's face. Quick, the flash of something genuine beneath the manufactured calm, something uglier and more honest. His jaw shifted. He took a step forward. "You don't have a single person coming for you," he said. "Romano was using you. Whatever he told you, whatever he made you think. He's a businessman. You were a problem he was going to leverage. Now, you're just a problem." Nia looked at him. "You keep telling me who's coming and who isn't," she said. "Like you know." "I know because I know men like Dante Romano." "You don't know anything about what I know," said Dante. The warehouse went very still. Connor turned. Dante was standing 20 feet away in the middle of the floor, having crossed from the wall to the open space during Nia's last sentence. He had not announced himself. He had not dramatic paused in the doorway. He was simply suddenly present, the way problems that have been ignored long enough eventually just appear in the center of the room. The two men flanking Nia moved simultaneously, hands going to waistbands, bodies shifting into positions. The two men by the south door heard the silence and turned, and now there were four of them with hands on weapons and one of him in the middle of the floor. Connor stared at him. Then Connor did the thing Dante had least expected, which was laugh. It was a real laugh. Not performed, genuine, surprised. The laugh of a man who has been handed an absurdity he wasn't prepared for. "You came yourself," Connor said. "You actually came yourself." He looked at Dante with something that was almost wonder. "To a warehouse. In Maspeth. Alone." "I'm not alone," Dante said. "There are four men." "Connor," Dante said, "I've been doing this since before you learned to drive. Look at the loading dock entrance behind you." Connor didn't look. He was 28 and certain of himself, and he'd inherited everything he had, and none of it had taught him to look when someone told him to. "That's a bluff." "It's not. If you had backup outside, you wouldn't be standing in the middle of my floor right now." "I'm standing in the middle of your floor," Dante said, "because I wanted to hear what you were saying to her." And I've heard enough." The south doors opened. Not dramatically. They just opened, the way doors open when people on the other side of them have been waiting for a specific sound and have heard it. Four men came in from the south. Two more appeared from the east corridor that connected to the collapsed section, which meant Ortega's assessment of the entry points had been accurate and Vincent's people had found the freight entrance. 6 men total, positioned before Connor's people had fully processed that the south entrance was no longer their wall. Connor's 4 men were suddenly not 4 men against 1. They were 4 men against 7, in a space where the math had changed without anyone firing anything. The room held. One of Connor's men, the one to Nia's left, bigger than the other, with the specific stillness of someone trained rather than just willing, was doing the calculation. Dante could see it in his posture. The moment where a professional evaluates a situation and separates it from whatever he was being paid to be committed to. "Your men are professionals," Dante said, loudly enough for the room, but directed at Connor. "They know what this floor looks like right now. Let them go." "You don't give orders in my building." "It's not your building, Connor. It's Iron Gate Solutions building, which is your father's building, which means the Federal Financial Task Force that has been investigating Iron Gate Solutions for 18 months has the paperwork to connect it to Patrick Gallagher." Dante paused. "That's not a threat. That's information. It was already true before tonight. Tonight just means it matters more." Connor's face had changed. The laugh was gone. The moderate tone was gone. What was left was younger than what had been there before, rawer, with the specific quality of someone who has spent their whole life behind the wall of their family name, and is only now, in this specific moment, beginning to feel the wall not being there. "You have nothing on my father," he said. "I don't need anything on your father," Dante said. "The Federal Task Force has plenty. I just made sure they knew which documents to request and when." He took 3 steps forward, slow, deliberate, keeping his hands visible. "I've been hitting your family for 48 hours, Connor. Not with guns. Guns are loud. With everything else. Shipping routes. Money laundering structures. The city councilman your father keeps on a monthly retainer." He stopped. "The security footage from the casino corridor that your team thought they'd deleted but had been backed up to a cloud account that your IT director, who made a phone call to my people 2 months ago because he was nervous about his future, had access to." Connor's jaw went rigid. "She didn't have to say a word," Dante said quietly. "The building said it for her." The big man to Nia's left lowered his hands. 1 second later, the other 3 men did the same. Not dramatic, professional. The arithmetic had finished itself and they'd read the answer. Connor stood in the middle of the warehouse floor with no wall and no name behind him and looked at Dante Romano with the specific expression of a man who has been certain all his life that certainty was the same thing as safety and is only now discovering the difference. This is over something you don't even... He stopped himself, tried again. His voice cracked on the first attempt, which he covered by shifting his weight. She's nobody. She's a casino waitress. You burned down 11 years of peace for a... Say it, Dante said. Connor went quiet. You almost said it. You almost said the word you've been using about her since the beginning. Dante's voice had not changed temperature once in this entire exchange. That was the thing Connor couldn't process. The absolute absence of heat in it, because heat implies that the other person could have chosen differently. Say it. Connor looked at him. She's nobody, Connor said. Defiant. The last card of a man with no cards. Dante hit him. Not with rage, that was the thing. That was what would be discussed later by the men who were in the room and would spend years describing this moment. Not with rage, with something colder and more decided than rage. One punch, thrown from the shoulder, with the full weight of a man who knew exactly how hard he was hitting and had chosen the amount deliberately. Connor's head snapped back and he went down hard, one knee hitting concrete first, then both hands, the sound of it echoing in the industrial ceiling. He didn't get back up immediately. The room held its silence. Dante turned. Nia was looking at him. Still in the chair, arms still around her ribs, but her posture had changed. Not collapsed, not broken. Something in her spine had lengthened, very slightly. The expression on her face was complicated in the way that expressions are when a person is feeling several things simultaneously, and none of them are simple. Can you stand up? He asked. Same words as the alley, same quiet. She stood up. She moved wrong, the ribs, the exhaustion, the hours in the chair, but she stood without reaching for anything, without asking for help, on her own 2 feet in the middle of a Maspeth warehouse at 6 in the morning, which was maybe the most purely Nia Brooks thing Dante had seen her do. He crossed the floor toward her. She looked at him when he was close enough that they were having a conversation and not a transaction. The cloud backup, she said. Was that real? Yes. You had it before tonight? Ortega found it yesterday afternoon, he said. I was waiting to see if I needed it. She processed that. You came anyway. Even with the footage, you came yourself. Yes. Why? He looked at her for a moment. At the bruised cheekbone, the exhaustion, the 2 cracked ribs she'd been sitting with for going on 36 hours without complaining about them once in his presence. Because you weren't an asset, he said. You were a person in a building I needed to get to. She didn't say anything. Her jaw worked slightly. She was not going to cry. He'd already learned that about her. The tears were not her currency. But something around her eyes tightened in a way that he understood was the near equivalent. We need to move, he said. I know. Can you walk to the car? I could walk to the car when I had 1 cracked rib, she said. I can still walk to the car with 2. He almost smiled. Almost. Behind him, Connor Gallagher was getting to his feet, and 2 of Vincent's men had moved to his position without being told to. Connor's hands were being secured with the practiced efficiency of people who did this without drama. The big man who had lowered his weapon first was speaking quietly to one of Dante's men. The conversation of professionals establishing terms. The external sounds were arriving now. The specific sounds of the legal machinery Dante had set in motion, because his last communication to the federal task force contact had included the Maspeth address and a 1-sentence note. Tonight is when you'll want people there. Sirens. Still distant. Still several minutes out. But real and getting less distant. Connor heard them too. You set this up, Connor said. Not outraged, past outrage, into something flatter. The whole thing, you let them take her. Dante turned slightly to look at him. No, he said. I didn't let them take her. Someone I trusted made a mistake, and they took her. There's a difference. He held Connor's eyes. But yes, when I knew where she was, I made sure the people who've been building a case on your family for 18 months knew where to find a reason to accelerate it. My father will... Your father, Dante said, is currently having a conversation with federal investigators about Iron Gate solutions that began, he looked at his watch, approximately 40 minutes ago. He was approached at his home in Westchester. I don't know how that conversation is going, but I know it's happening because some of the documents that made it possible were delivered last night by people I trust who are not part of my organization and have no reason to be traced back to it. Connor stared at him. You've been at this since about 3 in the morning, Dante said, when I couldn't sleep. The sirens were closer now. 2 minutes. Maybe less. Blue and red beginning to paint faint colors on the warehouse windows. Dante turned back to Nia. She was looking at the windows. Time to go, he said. She looked at him. Something in her face, but not gratitude exactly, because Nia Brooks didn't do gratitude the easy, uncomplicated way, and he'd learned in 3 days not to expect it, and to prefer the absence of it because what she gave instead was more honest. Something steadier than gratitude. More permanent. Yeah, she said. Okay. She moved toward the loading dock exit. He fell into step beside her. Not in front, not guiding her. Beside her, at exactly the distance she set by not moving away. They walked through the interior of the warehouse in the growing blue-red light, past the equipment frames and the pallet racking, past the specific geometry of the space that had been designed to make her feel like she had no options. Behind them, Connor Gallagher said something, one last thing, directed at Nia's back. Dante heard it. Fat black nobody worth dying for. He felt Nia's stride break. Not stop, just falter. One step, a half-beat of hesitation. And he saw her jaw set, and he watched her choose to keep walking, and the choosing was the most deliberate and complete act of dignity he had seen in a very long time. He did not turn around. He did not give Connor Gallagher the attention that turning around would have meant. Instead, he matched Nia's pace, and they came out through the loading dock into the gray November morning, and the cold hit them both, and she exhaled once, long, controlled, the exhale of a person who has been holding something for hours and is finally, in this specific patch of gray outdoor air, allowed to put it down. Marcus was waiting with the car at the west approach, exactly where Dante had told him to be. Nia stopped walking for a moment, just stood there in the cold, eyes forward. He said it again, she said, not asking, not surprised. Naming it. Yes, Dante said. She nodded. Slow. The same nod as the alley, as the back room, as every moment in 3 days when she had been handed a truth she already knew and had made the choice to metabolize it instead of being broken by it. I'm very tired, she said. I know. Not just from tonight. I know, he said again. And he did. She looked at him. Is it over? He thought about Patrick Gallagher in Westchester with federal investigators. He thought about the cloud backup, the shipping routes, the councilmen, the documents that had been in motion since 3 in the morning. He thought about Connor in zip ties in a warehouse surrounded by law enforcement that had 18 months of reasons to make this arrest stick. The worst of it, he said. She looked at him for another moment. Then she got in the car. Dante stood outside for 3 more seconds, long enough to hear the first federal vehicle pull into the south approach of the warehouse, long enough to know that the room he'd just left was now someone else's room to manage. And then he got in beside her, and Marcus pulled away from the curb. The car moved through streets that hadn't woken up yet. That particular pre-dawn quality where the city is present but not operational. Lights on in buildings but nobody at the windows. Traffic signals cycling through their colors for nobody. The occasional cab running routes out of habit. Marcus drove without being told where to go, which meant he was taking them back to the club, which was the default, which was wrong. But Dante didn't correct him for the first several blocks because he was sitting in the back seat next to Nia and she had fallen asleep. Not gradually. Not the slow surrender of someone drifting. She had been upright and then she was not. Her head dropping to her own shoulder, her breathing going long and even in the space of maybe 90 seconds. The body making a unilateral decision that the mind had been overriding for 36 hours. Dante looked at her for a moment. The bruised cheekbone. The way she held herself even in sleep, slightly curled toward her own ribs, protecting them without being awake to choose it. The casino uniform still on, still slightly damp from the Greenpoint night air. The gold trim catching nothing in the car's low interior. He looked at her, and he thought about a thing he hadn't let himself think about clearly until this moment, Because clarity about certain things is a liability when you are in the middle of trying to do something and can't afford to feel the weight of it yet. He thought about what it had cost. Not in the ledger sense. He could account for that separately, and the accounting would be complex but manageable. The shipping routes he'd frozen, the politicians he'd turned, the documents delivered to federal investigators. The 18 months of someone else's case that he'd accelerated and aimed like a piece of equipment. All of that had cost real things, favors spent that couldn't be rebuilt quickly, alliances strained. The treaty. The treaty was gone, which was a fact he'd chosen and would continue to choose and had no regret about, but the absence of it meant a period of realignment that would take months and require sustained attention. All of that was manageable. What he was thinking about, in the car, watching Nia sleep with 2 cracked ribs and 36 hours of fear in her body, was the other kind of cost. The kind that doesn't show up in ledgers. He tapped Marcus on the shoulder. "Take us to the Riverside property," he said quietly. "The apartment on the 3rd floor. Call ahead and have someone open it and get supplies, food, clothes, whatever the women's section of the all-night pharmacy on Amsterdam has." He paused. "Get a size. I don't know the size. Get a range of sizes and let her choose." Marcus nodded, already reaching for his phone. Dante looked out the window. Somewhere in Westchester, Patrick Gallagher was talking to federal investigators. Somewhere in Maspeth, Connor Gallagher was in the back of a law enforcement vehicle. And somewhere in a building in Brooklyn that nobody connected to either family knew about, a man named Reeves had a concussion and had been asking, but according to the message Vincent had sent 20 minutes ago, not about his own condition, but about whether the woman from the safe house was okay. Dante made a note to do something meaningful for Reeves when this was settled. He didn't know what yet, something that fit the man. Reeves would reject anything that looked like compensation and accept anything that looked like respect. And there was a difference, and Dante knew how to navigate it. He closed his eyes for exactly 4 minutes, which was not sleep, but was adjacent to it, the kind of rest that men in his position learned to take in fractions. Then his phone buzzed. "Vincent." He answered without speaking. "Connor's been processed," Vincent said. "Federal jurisdiction, which means it stays out of the NYPD chain and away from anyone the Gallagher family has leverage with downtown." A pause. "Patrick Gallagher has retained counsel. The conversation in Westchester ended after 40 minutes, which means he lawyered up, which means he's taking it seriously. He should. The documents you had delivered, the task force is calling them significant." Another pause. The kind Vincent took when he was deciding how much precision a thing required. Dante. The shipping route records. The money laundering structures. The councilman payments. That is 18 months of federal investigation compressed into a package that someone with considerable organizational skill prepared and delivered at 3 in the morning. "Someone did," Dante said. "It's going to be looked at." "I know. We're going to have questions to answer." "I know that too," Dante said. "We'll answer them the way we answer things, carefully and with good lawyers." "And Tommy Ricci?" Dante looked out the window, a truck making an early delivery. A man with a dog. The city beginning its first movements toward the day. "Tommy made a mistake," he said. "He believed what someone told him because he wanted the easier answer. That's not—" He stopped. "I'm not going to punish a man for being afraid and choosing wrong. I'm going to make sure he understands the weight of what that choice almost cost." He paused. "Then he's going to spend the next year doing the most thankless work we have until I decide he's earned his way back to anything resembling trust. That's more mercy than most would give him." "I don't do things because most would," Dante said. "He gets this one. He doesn't get another." "Understood." Vincent's voice shifted slightly. A tone change so minimal that only 9 years of working together would have made it audible. "How is she?" Dante looked at Nia, asleep against her own shoulder. "Exhausted," he said. "Hurt. Intact." "Good," Vincent said, with a directness that meant he'd formed his own view of the situation and it aligned with Dante's, and he wasn't going to complicate it with further comment. "Get some sleep yourself." "Soon," Dante said. He hung up, looked at the window for the rest of the drive. The apartment on the 3rd floor of the Riverside property was one of 4 that Dante kept in various parts of the city for reasons that ranged from practical to precautionary. This one was comfortable in an unremarkable way. Real furniture, a functional kitchen, windows that looked onto a courtyard rather than a street. Nothing that announced itself. Nothing that required maintenance beyond the practical. The kind of place where a person could be present without feeling observed. When Nia woke up, in the car, 2 blocks from the building, with the abrupt full return to consciousness that people develop when sleep has been dangerous for long enough, she sat up straight and was already scanning before she registered where she was. "We're not at the club," she said. "No," Dante said. "Different place. Safer." She looked out the window, looked at him, decided not to argue. Inside, someone had left food on the counter. The real kind, not catered, the kind that came from an actual grocery and required a human being to have thought about what another human being might need. Eggs, bread, fruit. A bag from the pharmacy on Amsterdam, which contained, among other things, a range of clothing options in a range of sizes, folded and still in their packaging, which was exactly what Dante had asked for, and which Marcus had apparently managed in under 30 minutes, which was why Marcus was paid what he was paid. Nia stood in the middle of the kitchen and looked at the bag. Then she looked at Dante. "Someone went shopping," she said. "Yes. At 6:30 in the morning. The pharmacy opens early." She looked at the bag for another moment. Something moved across her face, not the almost tears of the previous night. Something quieter. The specific expression of a person who has been managing on so little for so long that the presence of ordinary consideration lands as something remarkable. "Okay," she said. Her voice was slightly different when she said it, slightly less armored. Is there a shower?" "Down the hall. Take whatever time you need." She took the pharmacy bag and disappeared. Dante made coffee, not because he particularly needed it. He'd been running on the specific adrenaline that replaces need for a long time now. But because making coffee gave his hands something to do, and his hands needed something to do. He stood at the counter and listened to the sounds of the apartment, the pipes, the shower running, the specific quality of a space that had another person in it. And he thought about what happened next. Not tactically. He'd been thinking tactically for 36 hours, and that part of his brain needed to be rested before it made another useful contribution. He thought about it in the simpler, more uncomfortable way. In terms of Nia Brooks and what she needed and what he was and wasn't positioned to be. He was a complicated person. He'd known that for a long time without spending much energy on it because the complexity had always served the function of his life. It made him good at what he did, and what he did required a person who could hold contradictions. He could be genuinely kind in one moment and coldly ruthless in the next, and both of those things were completely true and not in conflict inside him, which was something that had fascinated and disturbed everyone who'd gotten close enough to see it. Nia Brooks had gotten close enough to see it faster than almost anyone, and she hadn't flinched, not at the power of it, not at the danger of it. She'd looked at him the way she looked at things, directly, with those careful evaluating eyes, and made her assessments and kept them to herself and dealt with him the same way regardless. As a person, not as a title or a resource. He didn't know what to do with that. He'd been honest about that, at least to himself. She came out 40 minutes later in clothes that fit. She'd found the right sizes from the bag, or close enough, a gray sweatshirt and dark pants that were practical rather than anything else. And she'd done something with her hair that made her look less like someone who'd been through what she'd been through, and more like someone who had survived it, which was a distinction that mattered. She sat at the kitchen counter and accepted the coffee he pushed toward her and held it the same way she'd held the first one, both hands, eyes closed for exactly 3 seconds. The same ritual. He'd noticed it before and noticed it again and said nothing about it because some things a person does don't need commentary. "I want to know what happened," she said. "All of it. From the beginning of last night forward." He told her. Straightforwardly, without omitting anything that was hers to know. Tommy Ricci and what he'd given to Connor's people. The car on the block at 8:40. The 4:15 entry. Reeves. The Maspeth warehouse and how he'd found the address and the 45 feet of blind spot on the west face and the fire code push bar. The federal investigators and the documents and the 18 months of case that had been accelerated and aimed. She listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, turning the coffee cup on the counter with one finger. "Tommy Ricci," she said. "Yes?" "He thought handing me over would make everything simple." "Yes." "And now?" "He's spending a year doing penance work and thinking about the difference between simple and right," Dante said. "If that seems insufficient..." "No," she said. I don't need... I'm not looking for anyone else to suffer. She picked up the cup and drank, set it down. I just want to understand who knew about me and why. 6 people knew the location. One of them made a choice he shouldn't have made, and I believe him when he says he didn't understand what that choice meant in practice. That doesn't make it better. Dante paused. It makes it human, which is its own category. She thought about that. What happens to Connor? Federal charges, the assault, and everything connected to his family's operation that comes up in the investigation. Dante's voice was even. The assault charge specifically is supported by security footage that was never properly deleted from a cloud backup. Witness statements from 3 members of the casino waitstaff who have now been contacted by federal investigators and are no longer employees of a Gallagher establishment and therefore have significantly less reason to stay quiet. Nia looked at him. You got the witnesses. My people reached out to them yesterday morning, quietly. Made sure they understood that there was a path that didn't cost them their safety. He paused. 2 of them came forward within the hour. The 3rd took longer. She has a family. She needed more information before she could feel safe. He paused again. She's safe. Nia set the cup down. She looked at the counter for a long moment. The world I live in, she said slowly, has a very specific way of telling you that you're worth exactly nothing. And it's not usually one big thing. It's 1,000 small things over 1,000 days. The way someone doesn't move to make room for you, the way a job description changes when they see you in person, the way a man looks at you like you existing in his space is an imposition. She looked up. Connor was just one of them. I was loud and he had money and he was willing to use his hands, but he wasn't. He wasn't a departure from my life. He was just a louder version of it. Dante held her gaze. I know, he said. Do you? Not from experience, he said. But I know what I've watched, and I know what a person looks like when they've been managing that for long enough that it's become the weather. Just the permanent condition of existing. He paused. You carry it like weather, like it would be strange not to. She was very still. I don't want to carry it like weather anymore, she said. Not dramatic, just a declaration, the way a person states a thing they've decided. You don't have to, he said. That's easy to say. I know it is, he said. I'm not saying it because it's easy. I'm saying it because you're already different than you were 3 days ago, and not because of anything I did. You walked out of a warehouse at 6 in the morning under your own power after 2 cracked ribs and a night in a chair, and you didn't ask anyone for help walking. Something shifted in her face. I noticed that, he said. I notice things. It's a professional habit I can't turn off. He picked up his own coffee. You're not the person who was in that alley. You were already changing before I showed up. The alley was the worst night. It wasn't the defining one. She looked at him for a long time. You're a very strange man, Dante Romano, she said. I know. You run a criminal organization. I do. And you are sitting at a kitchen counter telling a casino waitress that she's not defined by the worst thing that happened to her. Those 2 things aren't contradictions, he said. They're just both true. She almost smiled. The almost smile he was beginning to recognize. The one that lived at the corner of her mouth for a half second before she decided whether or not to let it fully arrive. This time it arrived. Small, real, the kind of smile that costs something and is given anyway. My grandmother, she said, would have had a lot of opinions about you. Good ones? Not entirely. She picked up the cup again. She had a saying. She said a person's worth isn't in what they've done. It's in what they do when the door is closed and nobody's watching. She paused. I've been thinking about that a lot. And? And I think you opened a door that was very easy to walk past, she said. And I think you knew it was easy to walk past and you opened it anyway. She looked at him directly, the careful evaluating eyes, doing what they always did. I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything with it, he said. Not right now. She nodded. They drank coffee in silence for a while. The kind of silence that isn't empty, that has weight and texture and a particular quality of 2 people being present in the same space without needing to fill it. The weeks that followed were not clean. They were not the neat resolution of something resolved. They were the complicated, grinding, frequently exhausting process of aftermath, which is always harder and longer and less cinematic than the events that created it. Connor Gallagher was arraigned on federal charges 8 days after Macbeth. The assault charge was central. The financial crimes attached to the Gallagher organization were extensive. The 18 months of federal investigation that Dante had accelerated had been sitting in a drawer waiting for precisely this kind of entry point, and once it had one, it moved with the specific momentum of institutional process that has been given permission. Patrick Gallagher retained 4 lawyers and said nothing publicly for 2 weeks, and then said too much in a deposition that his lawyers had advised against, and that confirmed 3 things the investigators had been uncertain about. The Gallagher organization did not collapse overnight. That was not how these things worked. It frayed. It lost people who had been loyal because the Gallagher name meant safety. And when the name stopped meaning safety, they made the calculation that loyalty was a renewable resource and redirected it. The shipping routes stayed frozen because Dante kept them frozen, and without the shipping routes, the money stopped moving the way it needed to move. And without the money moving correctly, the entire structure went soft in the way that structures do when the thing they were built on turns out to have been provisional. Ferrara called twice. The first call Dante took. The second he let go to voicemail. The message was long and contained the word treaty 11 times, and Dante listened to it while standing in the kitchen of the Riverside apartment drinking coffee. And when it ended, he put the phone down and did not call back. Not because he had nothing to say to Ferrara, but because what he had to say would take a meeting, and the meeting would take preparation, and the preparation required him to know exactly what he was building toward before he sat down at a table and started building it in front of other people. He knew, eventually, what he was building toward. He just needed the city to be quiet enough to say it. Tommy Ricci appeared at the club on a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after Maspeth. He'd been told to come, not called. A handwritten note delivered by a man who didn't explain it, which was the specific kind of summons that people in Tommy's position understood was not optional. He looked like someone who hadn't been sleeping. The Carroll Gardens apartment, the expensive furniture placed without understanding, all of it probably felt different now. All of it probably had a different quality at 4 in the morning when the mind runs what it needs to run. He sat across from Dante in the main office. Didn't try to explain himself again. That part had been done. "There's a warehouse in the Bronx," Dante said. "It handles distribution for 3 of our legitimate businesses. The manager left last month. The work is physical, poorly paid relative to what you're used to, and completely unglamorous." He held Tommy's gaze. "You're going to run it. Not manage it. Run it. You'll know every shipment, every driver, every invoice. You'll be there when it opens and when it closes." Tommy nodded. "When something goes wrong, and something will go wrong, things always go wrong. You don't call someone. You fix it. You use the resources available to you, which will be limited, and you figure it out, and you make it work." Dante paused. "In about 9 months, I'm going to ask you how you're doing, and your answer is going to tell me everything I need to know about whether you've understood what I'm asking you to understand." "What are you asking me to understand?" Tommy said, quietly. Not defensive. Actually asking. "That people trust you with things," Dante said, "and that when they trust you with things, the thing you protect is not your own comfort. It's the thing they trusted you with." He paused. "A woman was taken out of a safe house because you wanted the situation to be simpler than it was. I need to know whether you've learned the difference between what you want a situation to be and what it is." Tommy looked at his hands. "I think about it every day," he said. "Good," Dante said. "Think about it every day at the Bronx warehouse." Nia did not go back to the casino. She hadn't intended to. The intention had resolved itself somewhere in the back room of Club Ossian on the first night, before she'd fully acknowledged it. The way some decisions settle inside you before your conscious mind has agreed to them. She stayed at the Riverside apartment for 2 weeks. Not because anyone told her to, but because the world she'd lived in before Maspeth needed time to reorganize itself before she walked back into it. And she was smart enough to know that and patient enough, barely, to honor it. During those 2 weeks, she filled 3 notepads. Not all recipes, though some were recipes, the grandmother's catalog being reconstructed from memory. 1 dish at a time, the margins dense with notes about consistency and temperature and the specific way certain things smelled when they were right. But some were plans, rough, practical, the kind of writing that a person does when they've been thinking about something for a long time and are finally letting it out of the theoretical and into the possible. Dante saw the notepads on the kitchen counter one evening when he came by to check on things, which he did every 2 or 3 days in a way that he told himself was practical, and that Nia received without comment in a way that suggested she understood it for what it was. "What neighborhood?" he said. She looked up from the notepad. "What?" "The bakery." "What neighborhood?" She looked at the notepad. "I haven't decided yet." "What are the criteria?" She thought about it seriously, which was the thing about Nia. She took questions seriously, even small ones, because she'd learned that small questions were often not small. It needs to be a neighborhood where people need something good that they can afford. Not a place where a bakery is a boutique. A place where it's a bakery. There are 3 neighborhoods in Brooklyn that fit that, he said, and 1 in Queens. "I know the Brooklyn ones," she said. "Which one in Queens?" He told her. She wrote it down. He almost said something, stopped himself. Looked at the notepads for a moment. "I can make the financing happen," he said, "without strings attached. A straight investment, your business, your decisions." She looked at him. "Why?" she asked. Same word as the alley, same tone, still looking for the real answer underneath. "Because you have something that works," he said. "I've seen what you can do with a notepad and a memory and a kitchen counter. I'd like to see what you can do with a real kitchen." He paused. "And because I'm good at identifying things worth investing in." "I'm not a business," she said, a slight edge on it. "I know you're not," he said. "I'm investing in the bakery, not in you." He held her gaze. "You're not something I'm trying to acquire." She held his gaze for a long moment. "Okay," she said, "then we can talk about it." The city did eventually go quiet. Not in the way that cities go silent. New York had no interest in silence and no capacity for it. But the particular noise of the Gallagher situation, the constant low-frequency tension of something unresolved and dangerous, faded in the way that those things fade when the structure underneath them gives way. The legal proceedings moved at the pace of legal proceedings, which was slow and complicated and not at all cinematic, but they moved. The shipping routes were renegotiated under new arrangements that left the Romano organization stronger than before, not because of the conflict, but because the conflict had demonstrated something about who Dante Romano was willing to go to the wall for. And that demonstration had weight with the kind of people for whom demonstrations are the only real currency. Ferrara eventually came around. He came to the table with a different posture, not the concerned elder managing a younger man's impulsive decision, but something more level. More like respect, which surprised him visibly. Dante said only one thing about it, which was that power without a line you won't cross is just appetite, and Ferrara sat with that for a moment and then nodded slowly, in the way of a man who has known something for years and is only now finding the specific words for it. Sal Marchetti called from Florida, where he spent winters, and said nothing about the Gallagher situation except, "You did what you needed to do, don't talk about it at dinner tables," which was as close to approval as Sal Marchetti ever got. The bakery opened on a Saturday morning in early March, 4 months after a November night in an alley. It was in Brooklyn, not Queens. She'd decided that herself, without discussing it with Dante, and the neighborhood she'd chosen was the right one. He knew it was the right one when he drove past it on a Thursday to see how the renovation was coming and saw 2 women from the block standing on the sidewalk looking at the window display she'd put up, not looking away, not moving on. He didn't go in that Thursday. It wasn't the right time. He went in on a Saturday evening in April, after closing, because Nia had said in a text that was shorter than it could have been, which was how she texted, short and direct, that the ovens were behaving correctly for the first time, and she wanted someone to know. She was at the back counter when he came in. The front was closed, display cases empty, chairs on tables. But the kitchen was running, warm and bright, the specific smell of caramelized sugar and baked bread filling the space. She was writing in a notepad, standing, which was how she worked. She'd explained once that she thought better on her feet, which made sense for someone who'd spent years carrying trays. She looked up. "They behaving?" he said. "More or less," she said. "The left oven runs 4 degrees hot, which I've adjusted for. The right one is perfect." She looked at him for a moment. "You look tired." "I am." "You should sleep more." "Probably," he said. He looked around the space. Small. Not too small, but right-sized for what she was doing. Real equipment, nothing boutique, the kind of kitchen built for actual use. A chalkboard on the wall with specials written in handwriting he recognized from the notepads. A small photograph on the corner counter. Older woman, broad smile, the specific quality of photographs of people who are no longer alive. Your grandmother, he said. Hmm? Nia looked at the photograph. She'd have a lot to say about all of this. Good things? Some. She picked up the notepad. She'd say the caramel cake isn't exactly right yet. She'd be correct. She set the notepad down. But she'd say the bread is better than hers, which would be the biggest compliment she ever gave anything. He looked at her. She was different in this space. Not a different person, not fundamentally altered, but settled in a way she hadn't been in the alley, or the back room, or the Maspeth warehouse, or the Riverside apartment. Like a person who has spent a long time in borrowed spaces and has finally located the one that belongs to them. The city is quiet, he said. She looked at him with the careful eyes. You mean it's really over? The worst of it. And the rest of it? He thought about how to answer that. Thought about Ferrara and Sal and the renegotiated shipping routes and the Bronx warehouse where Tommy Ricci had been working for 3 months and, from all reports, working hard. He thought about the federal proceedings and Patrick Gallagher's lawyers and the very slow grinding of institutional process. He thought about Reeves, who had recovered from the concussion and had declined the generous thing Dante had tried to do and accepted the respectful thing instead, which had been exactly as predicted. The rest of it is manageable, he said. That's a careful answer. It's an honest one. She looked at him for a moment, then she turned back to the counter and picked up a small plate. On it was a single piece of caramel cake. She put it on the front counter between them. Tell me if the caramel is right, she said. He looked at the cake, then at her. You want my opinion? You're the only person here, she said, and you've been honest with me consistently, which is a rarer quality than people pretend. She pushed the plate slightly toward him. Eat the cake. He ate the cake. It was very good. The caramel was deep and slightly bitter at the edge, the way good caramel is when someone hasn't pulled it too early. And the cake underneath was the kind of texture that you only get when someone knows what they're doing and also cares about what they're doing, which was not the same thing. It's good, he said. But the caramel is almost right, he said. There's something at the finish, something your grandmother knew and you haven't found yet. She looked at him sharply. Then she looked at the cake. Then, slowly, she nodded. I know, she said. I'm close. It's something about the timing. She looked at the photograph on the counter. She never wrote that part down. You'll find it, he said. You sound sure. I told you, he said. I'm sure of enough things to be useful. She looked at him, and for the first time since the alley, she let the almost smile go all the way. Not the small, careful one that lived at the corner of her mouth. A full one, with her whole face in it, the kind of smile that costs nothing because the person giving it has finally reached the place where it's safe to give it. I told you that you're a strange man, she said. You did. I stand by it. I know you do, he said. She laughed. It was not a performed laugh or a polite one. It was the laugh of someone who has gone through enough difficult things that genuine amusement arrives as a small, particular gift. It filled the bakery and went into the warm air near the ovens and stayed there. Dante Romano, who had ruled an organization through fear and intelligence and the careful management of every variable he could reach, stood at the counter of a small bakery in Brooklyn in April and felt, for the first time in a very long time, that he was in a room he was allowed to be in. Not because of what he'd done, not because of the shipping routes or the documents or the 45 feet of blind spot on the west face of a Maspeth warehouse, because of who was in the room with him. She turned back to her notepad, already thinking about the caramel, about what her grandmother had known that she hadn't found yet. Her pen moved. He stayed at the counter for another hour. Nobody needed to explain why.